Welcome to Dream Retro, where we drift back to simpler times and relive the moments that shaped us. Tonight, we're going on a journey together, a cozy trip down memory lane to revisit the places, experiences, and feelings that once filled our everyday lives. Here at Dream Retro, we believe the past holds a special kind of comfort, a warmth that helps us relax and remember who we were and how far we've come. So get comfortable, settle into your favorite spot, and let's travel back together to a time that feels both distant and remarkably close. Tonight, we're taking a very special journey back in time. We're going to explore Blockbuster Video and the beautiful ritual of renting movies, a time that shaped an entire generation's relationship with entertainment and created memories that remain vivid decades later. Before we settle into the warmth of those memories, let's get comfortably positioned for sleep. You may already be lying in a position that feels just right for you, but if you need to make any adjustments, there's no harm in doing so. Shift your pillow, adjust your blankets, find that perfect spot where your body can fully surrender to rest. When you're ready, bring your attention to the flow of your breath, in and out of the body, that natural and familiar rhythm that we can count on as our gateway to peace and calm. Just notice the air as it enters your nostrils, feeling that very subtle sensation of coolness on its way in, and then sense the warmth of the air as it flows back out with each gentle release. Try to breathe in deeply and just hold that nourishing breath at your heart center for a couple of seconds. Then release it back out, warm and soothing. As you inhale and briefly hold the breath at your heart once more, imagine that air warming within you and bringing comfort to your entire being. As you release it, any tensions or worries from the day can flow out with it, dissipating into the night air. Continue to breathe deeply, holding the peace as it warms your heart, then letting go of anything disruptive as you exhale. There's nothing else you have to do now. Simply remain aware of your breathing as you relax more and more, sinking deeper into your bed with each breath. While you settle in, let me tell you about something that was once as ordinary as checking your phone, but has become extraordinary in its absence. The story of Blockbuster Video and what it was really like to be there. Part 1. The birth of a blue and yellow empire. Our story begins on October 19th, 1985, in Dallas, Texas. On that autumn day, a man named David Cook opened the doors to the first Blockbuster Video store, and though nobody knew it yet, he was about to change how millions of people would spend their Friday nights for the next 2.5 decades. David Cook wasn't a movie person, not really. He was a software developer who had built a business called Cook Data Services back in 1978. Creating computer programs for the oil and gas industry in Texas. These were sophisticated database systems that could cost companies as much as $120,000. For a while, business was booming, but in the early 1980s, the oil industry crashed. A surplus of oil meant plummeting prices, and suddenly Cook's expensive software systems were luxuries that struggling oil companies couldn't afford. His business nosedived, but Cook's wife Sandy loved movies. She had been watching the video rental industry with interest, and she suggested they get into that business. David began researching, and what he found was fascinating. The home video market was exploding. Between 1983 and 1985, the video rental industry had grown from $1 billion to $3.7 billion. More American households owned VHS players than ever before, but the industry itself was completely fragmented. Most video rental stores in 1985 were small, family-owned operations. They were often cramped, dimly lit places where movies were kept behind the counter to prevent theft. Customers had to ask for what they wanted, and the selection was usually limited to a few hundred titles at most. The checkout process was laborious, involving handwritten ledgers and paper forms. Distributors charged approximately $70 per tape, which meant small stores couldn't afford to stock many copies of popular titles. If you wanted to rent a hit movie on Friday night, you often had to call ahead and hope they still had a copy available. David Cook saw all these problems through the lens of a database engineer. He realized that with the right computer systems and enough capital, someone could revolutionize this chaotic industry. He could create a store with thousands of titles, all displayed openly on shelves like books in a bookstore. He could use barcode scanners to make checkout fast and simple. He could use computer databases to track inventory and understand customer preferences. He could create something that felt modern, organized, and family-friendly. But first, he tried to work within the existing system. Cook bought into a franchise called VideoWorks in Dallas. He had grand plans for how to set up his store, including a specific color scheme, blue and yellow. When VideoWorks refused to let him decorate his store in those colors, Cook walked away from the franchise entirely and decided to open his own video store instead. On October 19, 1985, the first Blockbuster Video opened its doors at the corner of Skillman Street and Northwest Highway in Dallas. The store had cost $800,000 to set up, which was an enormous investment for a single video store at the time. But it was unlike anything customers had ever seen. The store had an inventory of 8,000 VHS tapes and 2,000 beta tapes, covering about 6,500 different titles. This was many, many times larger than what any competing store could offer. The tapes weren't hidden behind a counter. They were displayed openly on shelves throughout the store, organized by genre and alphabetically within each genre. Customers could browse at their leisure, picking up boxes, reading the descriptions on the back, just like shopping in a bookstore. Theft prevention came through technology rather than locked cases. A magnetic strip on each tape and sensors at the door would trigger an alarm if someone tried to leave with an unreturned video. Each tape had a barcode, as did each membership card. Checkout took seconds instead of minutes. Computers tracked every rental, every return, every piece of inventory. It was revolutionary. That first night, the store was so mobbed with customers that Cook had to lock the doors to prevent more people from coming in. The store was an immediate, undeniable hit. People had been waiting for something exactly like this. They just hadn't known what to ask for. Encouraged by this success, Cook opened 3 more stores within the next year. He built a $6 million warehouse in Garland, Texas, to supply his growing chain. He began franchising the Blockbuster name and system, allowing other entrepreneurs to open their own Blockbuster stores. By early 1987, there were 19 Blockbuster locations. That's when the trajectory of the company changed dramatically. In February 1987, Cook sold 1/3 of the company to a group of 3 investors for $18.6 million. These weren't just any investors. They were all former executives at Waste Management Incorporated, the garbage disposal company that had become the largest in the world. The lead investor was Wayne Huizenga, who had co-founded Waste Management in 1972 and served as its president and chief operating officer until 1984, when he retired a very wealthy man. Huizenga was looking for his next big business venture. His approach was systematic. He wanted to find a fragmented market without dominant players, a business that could be set up locally but scaled nationally, something where he could throw up competitive barriers. He found all of that in Blockbuster. Where David Cook had envisioned growth through franchising, Huizenga saw something different. Company-owned stores and aggressive acquisition. He didn't want to sell the Blockbuster name to individual franchisees. He wanted to own the stores themselves, to buy up competing chains, to dominate the market completely. By late 1987, David Cook had left the company he'd founded, and Huizenga was in control. The headquarters moved from Dallas to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What happened next was extraordinary. Under Huizenga's leadership, Blockbuster began expanding at a pace that seemed almost impossible. At one point in 1990, a new Blockbuster store was opening somewhere every 24 hours. When Huizenga took over, Blockbuster had 19 locations. By the end of 1988, there were 400 stores. By 1990, over 1,000. The company was buying up competing chains wholesale. Major Video, Movies to Go, Errol's Video, and many others, absorbing them into the growing Blockbuster empire. Blockbuster went public in 1989, raising capital for even more expansion. The company expanded internationally throughout the 1990s, opening stores in the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Brazil, Mexico, Japan, and more than a dozen other countries. In 1994, media giant Viacom acquired Blockbuster for $8.4 billion, integrating it into a media empire that included MTV and Nickelodeon. But Blockbuster's peak came in 2004. At that moment in time, Blockbuster employed 84,300 people worldwide, including about 58,500 in the United States and about 25,800 in other countries. The company operated 9,094 stores in total, with more than 4,500 of these in the United States alone. The company's market value was around $5 billion, and it generated nearly $6 billion in annual revenue. Blockbuster accounted for approximately 60% of the entire video rental market in America. To understand just how dominant Blockbuster was, consider this. At its peak, more than 84 million Americans held active Blockbuster membership cards. In a country of about 290 million people at the time, that meant roughly 1 in every 3 Americans was a Blockbuster member. On any given Friday or Saturday night, millions of people were walking through those blue and yellow doors, participating in the ritual. Blockbuster had become more than a business. It had become a cultural institution, as familiar and commonplace as the grocery store or the gas station. The blue and yellow logo was as recognizable as McDonald's golden arches. The Blockbuster store was a landmark in nearly every American town and suburb, a destination, a gathering place, a part of the weekly routine. And for people who lived through those years, who spent countless Friday evenings browsing those aisles, the memories are still vivid and warm. Let's travel back there now, to what it was really like. Part 2, Friday evening 1998. Take a deep breath and let yourself remember. It's Friday evening in 1998. You're in your 20s, maybe your 30s. You've made it through another work week. The afternoon seemed to drag on forever, your eyes on the clock, willing it to move faster. But finally, 5 o'clock arrived. You shut down your computer, grabbed your jacket, said goodbye to your co-workers, and headed out to your car. The weekend stretched ahead, golden with possibility. Tonight was movie night. It had been a tradition for months now, maybe years. Every Friday, or nearly every Friday, you went to Blockbuster. Sometimes alone, sometimes with your partner or spouse, sometimes with friends. The ritual had become as much a part of Friday as the relief of clocking out. You drove home first, changed out of your work clothes into something comfortable. Jeans and a t-shirt, maybe a sweatshirt if the evening was cool. You had dinner, nothing elaborate, maybe takeout or something quick you threw together. The whole time, in the back of your mind, you were thinking about what kind of movie you wanted to watch tonight. Action, comedy, drama, something new, or revisiting an old favorite. Around 7 or 7:30 in the evening, you grabbed your car keys and your wallet. You checked to make sure your Blockbuster membership card was there. That familiar blue and yellow rectangle, slightly worn at the edges from being carried around. Your membership number was printed on it, along with your name. This card represented your access to entertainment, your passport to thousands of movies. The drive to Blockbuster was familiar, automatic. You probably went to the same location every time, the one closest to your house, or the one in the shopping center you frequented. You knew every turn, every stoplight. The evening was settling in, the sun low on the horizon, the sky turning shades of orange and purple. Other cars were on the road, people heading home from work, heading out for dinner, heading to their own Friday evening destinations. The shopping center, where your Blockbuster was located, had a few other stores, maybe a grocery store, a pizza place, a dry cleaner, a Radio Shack, a Walgreens. This was the landscape of American suburban retail in the 1990s, strip malls and parking lots, ordinary and comfortable in their familiarity. And there it was, the Blockbuster sign, bright blue with yellow letters, glowing against the darkening sky. Just seeing it triggered a little flutter of anticipation. You pulled into the parking lot and found a space. The lot was busy on Friday evenings, but rarely full. You could always find a spot. You turned off the car and sat for just a moment, looking at the store through your windshield. Through the large glass windows that made up most of the front of the building, you could see other customers inside, moving up and down the aisles, their arms full of blue video cases. The interior was brightly lit, almost glowing in the gathering dusk. It looked warm and inviting. You got out of your car, locked it, and walked across the parking lot. The air had that particular quality of Friday evenings, cooler than it had been during the day, fresh with the promise of the weekend. You could hear the distant sound of traffic, someone's car stereo playing too loud, the ordinary sounds of American evening life. You reached the entrance, those double glass doors with Blockbuster Video in large letters across them. Your hand gripped the metal handle, cool and smooth. You pulled the door open, and immediately you were enveloped in the atmosphere of Blockbuster. Part 3. Inside the store. The first thing that hit you was always the sound. The electronic beep 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 of movies being scanned at the checkout counter. The quiet conversations of other customers. Someone asking an employee where to find a particular title. Someone else asking about a movie's due date. The rustling sound of people pulling plastic cases off shelves and sliding them back. And underneath it all, music playing from the store's sound system, usually contemporary pop hits or movie soundtracks, at a volume that was present but not intrusive. Then there was the smell. If you spend time in Blockbuster in the VHS era, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's hard to describe to someone who wasn't there, but it was distinctive and immediate. It was partly the smell of thousands of plastic VHS cases, that particular chemical scent of molded plastic. It was partly the commercial carpet cleaner and air freshener that retail stores used. It was partly the popcorn and candy at the counter. All of these elements combined into something unique, something that existed nowhere else in the world except Blockbuster. If you walked into a Blockbuster store anywhere in America, even in a city you'd never visited before, it smelled the same. That scent meant movie night. It meant Friday evening. It meant entertainment and possibility. The lighting inside was bright, fluorescent fixtures overhead casting even illumination throughout the entire space. It wasn't harsh, exactly, but it was definitely bright, designed to make reading the movie titles easy, to give the store a clean, organized feeling. After the dimming natural light outside, the brightness inside felt like waking up, energizing. The floor beneath your feet was carpeted in that industrial blue and grey pattern that Blockbuster used in all its stores. Your footsteps made almost no sound as you walked in, letting the door close behind you. You took a moment to orient yourself, though you'd been here countless times. The layout was familiar, comforting in its consistency. Blockbuster stores had a standardized design, which meant whether you were in your hometown store or visiting one in another state, you generally knew where things were. Directly ahead was the checkout counter, usually with 2 or 3 registers open on a Friday evening. Behind the counter, employees moved with practiced efficiency, scanning movies in and out, swiping membership cards, answering questions, making small talk with customers. Most of the employees were young, high school or college students earning money for gas and weekend fun. They wore those dark blue Blockbuster polo shirts or t-shirts, sometimes with a name tag pinned to the chest. There were usually 1 or 2 older employees too, shift managers or people who'd been with the company a while, who seemed to know every movie in the store. To your right and left stretched the aisles, those wonderful, endless aisles of movies. The store extended back further than it looked from outside, a warehouse of entertainment. Each aisle was labeled with hanging signs indicating the genre: new releases, action, comedy, drama, horror, science fiction, romance, children's, classics. The new releases section was front and center, immediately visible when you walked in. This was prime real estate, the movies everyone wanted to see, the titles that had been in theaters just a few months earlier and were now available to rent. The new releases section was always the busiest part of the store on Friday nights. Clusters of people browsing through the titles, hoping the movie they wanted hadn't all been rented out yet. This was one of Blockbuster's innovations: multiple copies. Where small video stores might have 1 or 2 copies of a popular movie, Blockbuster would have dozens. When a major title was released on video, your local Blockbuster might have 40 or 50 copies on the shelf. This was possible because of revenue-sharing deals Blockbuster negotiated with studios in 1998. Instead of paying $70 per tape up front, Blockbuster paid just $2 to $5 per tape and gave the studios a percentage of the rental revenue. This arrangement allowed Blockbuster to stock many more copies of new releases, which meant customers were much more likely to find what they wanted, which meant they came back more often. The spines of the VHS cases faced out on the shelves, displaying the movie titles in readable text. The cases themselves were those oversized blue clamshell containers that Blockbuster used, standardized and uniform. When DVDs came along in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the cases got smaller, but the concept remained the same. Beyond the new releases, the rest of the store was organized by genre. Each section had its own feel, its own energy. The action section was full of explosive cover art, images of heroes with guns, buildings blowing up, cars flipping through the air, determined faces against fiery backgrounds. The comedy section featured bright colors, exaggerated expressions, promises of laughter. The drama section was more subdued, often showcasing close-ups of actors' faces, prestigious film posters, Oscar nominees and winners. Horror had its own dedicated area, usually toward the back of the store, with cover art designed to thrill and frighten monsters and killers and things that go bump in the night. The science fiction and fantasy section held promises of other worlds, space adventures, time travel, magic, and wonder. Romance had its own spot, pink-tinted covers and promises of love stories. The children's section was colorful and welcoming, often with Disney titles prominently featured, animated characters beaming from the covers. And then there were the older movies, the back catalogue, what Blockbuster called blockbuster favorites. These were films that were no longer new releases, but remained popular enough to keep in stock. This section was a treasure trove for anyone who loved movies, classics from the 70s and 80s, cult favorites, films you'd heard about but never seen. You could find Casablanca next to The Breakfast Club, next to Blade Runner, next to When Harry Met Sally. Above certain sections, promotional posters hung from the ceiling or were mounted on the walls. These were glossy, colorful advertisements for upcoming releases or current major titles. Some of them were genuine pieces of graphic design art, and they added to the visual environment of the store. There was always something to look at, something catching your eye. Near the checkout counter, there were racks of candy, all the movie theater classics, Junior Mints, Raisinets, Milk Duds, Sour Patch Kids, boxes of Dots and Good and Plenty. Next to the candy, there were shelves of microwave popcorn, that butter-flavored kind that made your whole house smell like a theater. Some locations also sold 2-liter bottles of soda, completing the home theater experience. These impulse purchases were strategically placed, last-minute additions to make movie night more complete. The store had its own energy, its own rhythm. People moved through with purpose, but without hurry. This wasn't a quick in-and-out transaction. People took their time, browsing, considering, picking up multiple movies and reading the descriptions before deciding. There was something almost meditative about it, this slow wandering through possibilities. Let yourself sink deeper into your bed now, your body completely relaxed, as we continue this journey through memory. Part 4. The Art of Browsing. You started walking slowly down one of the aisles, your eyes scanning the spines of the movie cases. This was the browsing phase, the heart of the Blockbuster experience. There was no rush. Rushing would have defeated the purpose entirely. Part of the joy was in taking your time, in letting yourself be drawn to different titles, in discovering things you hadn't known you wanted to watch. Maybe you came in with a specific movie in mind, something you'd heard about from a friend or seen advertised on TV, but even if you did, you didn't head straight for it. That would have been too efficient, too transactional. Instead, you wandered. You explored. You let the evening unfold at its own pace. Your hand reached out, fingers touching the plastic edge of a movie case. You pulled it from the shelf, feeling that satisfying resistance as it slid out from between its neighbors. The case was cool and smooth in your hands. You turned it over to read the back. This was ritual. Picking up a movie, reading the description, studying the cover art, deciding whether it appealed to you. The descriptions on the backs of video cases were their own art form, trying to convey the essence of a 2-hour film in just a few sentences. They had to hook you, had to make you want to watch this particular movie tonight. Some were straightforward plot summaries. Others were more evocative, trying to capture a mood or tone. Below the description, there were the technical details, the MPA A rating, the runtime, the year of release, the major stars. The stars' names mattered. Seeing a favorite actor made the movie more appealing, gave you a sense of what to expect. If you loved Harrison Ford, you'd give any movie with his name on it serious consideration. If you were a fan of Julia Roberts or Tom Hanks or Denzel Washington or Meg Ryan, their presence influenced your choice. You read this description carefully, trying to gauge whether this was the right movie for tonight's mood. It sounded interesting, but you weren't sure yet. You slid the case back onto the shelf and kept walking. This was the beautiful inefficiency of the Blockbuster experience. In the streaming era that would come later, you could browse thousands of titles from your couch, scrolling through digital menus with your remote or your phone. It was faster, certainly more convenient, but something was lost. The physical presence of the movies, the act of walking and searching, the tangible weight of the cases in your hands, the commitment required to actually go somewhere to rent a movie. All of this made the experience more real, more engaging, more memorable. You turned down another aisle, pulling out different movies, reading descriptions, considering options. Each time you picked up a case, you were entering into a little negotiation with yourself. Action or comedy, something thoughtful or something fun, a new release or an older film you'd been meaning to watch. As you browsed, other customers passed by, on their own parallel journeys through the store. A couple in their 30s or 40s stood together, heads close, discussing which of 2 romantic comedies to rent. You could hear snippets of their conversation. "We saw this one in the theater, remember? What about this one? Your sister recommended it." The easy intimacy of people who've been together long enough that choosing a movie together is a comfortable negotiation. A teenager, maybe 16 or 17, lingered in the horror section, studying the cases with an expression of excited nervousness. Horror movies held a particular appeal at that age. The thrill of being scared, the social currency of having seen the latest scary movie that everyone at school was talking about. You remembered that feeling yourself. A parent shepherded 2 young children, maybe 7 and 9 years old, toward the children's section. The kids were energized, excited about getting to pick movies for the weekend. "Can we get 2?" one asked. "We'll see," the parent replied. That time-honored answer that meant, "Probably yes, but I want to check them first." An elderly couple moved slowly through the classic section, holding hands as they browsed. They paused at certain titles, and you could hear their soft conversation, memories attached to certain films. "We saw this on our second date," one said. The other smiled, remembering. Movies weren't just entertainment. They were markers in a shared life, touchstones of memory. You continued browsing, pulling out movies that caught your eye. A spy thriller with an intriguing premise. A comedy that was supposed to be hilarious according to the description. A drama that had won some awards. Each was a possibility, a potential evening. Sometimes a Blockbuster employee passed by, restocking shelves, pulling returned movies from a cart and sliding them back into their proper places. They worked with casual efficiency, knowing exactly where each title belonged. If they noticed you looking particularly puzzled or indecisive, they might ask if you needed help finding anything. Sometimes you'd take them up on it, asking for recommendations. The good employees had genuine enthusiasm for movies and could steer you towards something you'd enjoy. You made your way gradually toward the new releases section. Here, the selection had been picked over somewhat. It was Friday evening after all, and the most popular titles went fast. But there were still plenty of options. You saw a title that caught your eye, a film you'd wanted to see in theaters but had missed. The cover looked intriguing, and you remembered reading good reviews. You picked it up, read the description on the back, felt that little spark of recognition and interest. This could be the one. But you weren't quite ready to commit. You held on to it, carrying it with you as you continued wandering. This was part of the process too, narrowing your options, getting closer to a decision while still leaving room to discover something else that might be even better. Maybe you passed by the TV section, where complete seasons of television shows were starting to become available on video. In the late 90s, this was still relatively new. You could rent entire seasons of The X-Files or Friends or Seinfeld, multiple tapes in a boxed set. It was an early preview of the binge-watching culture that would dominate the streaming era. Eventually, after maybe 15 or 20 minutes of browsing, you made your decision. The new release you'd picked up earlier. Yes, this was the one. It felt right. You could picture yourself at home, settled on the couch, watching this unfold on your TV screen. The decision settled over you with a sense of satisfaction. You'd found what you wanted. You headed toward the checkout counter, your chosen movie clutched in your hand. The browsing phase was complete. Now came the transaction. Part 5. At the counter. There was usually a short line at the checkout counter on Friday evenings, 2 or 3 people ahead of you, each with their own selections. You waited patiently, your movie in hand. The line moved steadily as employees scanned out rentals with practiced efficiency. While you waited, you might have glanced at the candy display one more time, considering whether to grab some junior mints or a box of Milk Duds. Or maybe your eyes drifted to the TV mounted above the counter, which usually played trailers for upcoming releases or promotional content from the studios. The sound was muted, but the images flickered across the screen. Previews of movies that would be coming to Blockbuster in the coming months. The person in front of you finished their transaction, gathered their movies, and headed for the exit. Now it was your turn. You stepped up to the counter, placing your selected movie on the surface between you and the employee. Maybe it was someone you recognized, someone who'd worked there for a while and had helped you before. Maybe it was someone new, young, learning the ropes. Either way, they greeted you with a smile, asked how your evening was going. You exchanged pleasantries, that brief moment of human connection. The employee picked up your movie case and opened it to check that the tape was actually inside. This was standard procedure, an automatic gesture. Sometimes customers accidentally returned the wrong tape in the wrong case or forgot to rewind, or rarely forgot to include the tape at all. Your tape was there, correctly placed. The employee closed the case and ran the barcode scanner over the label on the spine. Beep. Information appeared on their computer screen. Good choice, the employee might have said, glancing at the screen. I heard this one was really good. Or maybe, oh, I love this movie. You're going to enjoy it. These small interactions were part of the experience, little moments of shared enthusiasm for film. Can I see your membership card? The employee asked. You pulled it from your wallet, that blue and yellow rectangle you'd carried for years, and handed it over. The employee swiped it through the card reader or scanned its barcode. Your account information appeared on the screen. Your name, your rental history, your account standing. If you were a regular customer with no late fees or issues, the transaction proceeded smoothly. The employee told you the due date, usually 3 or 4 days for new releases, maybe a week for older titles. This is due back Monday evening, they'd say. Or, you have until Wednesday to return this. You nodded, making a mental note, though you also knew you'd probably return it before then. The cost was announced. $3.99 for a new release rental, maybe $2.99 for an older title. The prices varied somewhat by location and by year, but they were always reasonable, a small price for an evening's entertainment. You handed over a $5 bill, received your change, the coins clinking into your palm. But sometimes, and this was the moment every Blockbuster customer dreaded, the employee's expression would change slightly as they looked at your account. "Oh, it looks like you have a late fee from a previous rental," they'd say, their tone apologetic but firm. Late fees. Those 2 words could change the whole mood of the transaction. Nobody liked late fees, but they were a fundamental part of Blockbuster's business model. In fact, in the year 2000, Blockbuster generated $800 million in late fees alone, which represented about 16% of the company's total revenue. Late fees were how the system worked. Movies had to come back so others could rent them, and fees were the enforcement mechanism. If you had a late fee, you had to pay it before you could rent again. The employee would tell you how much you owed, and you'd pull out your wallet somewhat sheepishly, paying for your forgetfulness. $2 here, $5 there, sometimes more if you'd forgotten about a movie for a week or more. It wasn't the end of the world, but it stung. And you'd promise yourself you'd be better about returning movies on time, though inevitably, a few months later, you'd forget again, and the cycle would repeat. Assuming your account was clear, the employee placed your movie in a thin, white plastic bag with the Blockbuster logo printed on it. The bag wasn't strictly necessary, but it was part of the service, keeping your rental protected, marking you as a Blockbuster customer as you walked to your car. "Enjoy your movie," the employee said, handing you the bag. The tone was warm, genuine. They meant it. This was their job, yes, but it was also something more. They were facilitating people's entertainment, helping families and friends and individuals have good Friday nights. There was purpose in that. "Thanks, I will," you replied, and you meant it too. You were already looking forward to getting home. You stepped away from the counter, the next customer moving forward to take your place. You walked toward the exit, the same double glass doors you'd entered through maybe 20 or 30 minutes earlier. Your mission was accomplished. You had your movie. Friday evening could now properly begin. You pushed through the doors and stepped back out into the night. The air was cooler now, the sky fully dark, stars beginning to emerge overhead. The parking lot was still busy, cars coming and going, other people beginning or ending their own Blockbuster visits. You walked to your car, unlocked it, climbed inside, and set the Blockbuster bag carefully on the passenger seat. For just a moment, you sat in the quiet car, looking at the bag. Inside was tonight's entertainment, a story waiting to be experienced. You'd made it through the week. You'd gone to Blockbuster. You'd found the perfect movie. And now you were heading home to enjoy it. Life felt good. The weekend had officially begun. Let your breathing deepen now, your body sinking even further into relaxation as we continue. Part 6, the drive home and home theater ritual. The drive home took maybe 10 or 15 minutes. The familiar route automatic in the darkness. The Blockbuster bag sat on the passenger seat. and you might have glanced at it occasionally at red lights, feeling that pleasant anticipation building. You were already planning how the evening would unfold. When you got home, you parked in your driveway or in your apartment building's lot. You carried the Blockbuster bag inside, this small piece of treasure, this promise of entertainment. If you lived with a partner or spouse, maybe they'd been waiting for you, curious what you'd picked. If you lived with roommates, maybe one or more of them wanted to watch with you. If you lived alone, you had the evening entirely to yourself, which had its own appeal. You set the bag down on the coffee table or the kitchen counter while you prepared. Maybe you changed into even more comfortable clothes, pajama pants or sweatpants, an old t-shirt. Maybe you went to the kitchen and made popcorn, either the microwave kind you'd bought at Blockbuster or the kind you popped on the stove, the kernels rattling against the pot, the smell of butter and salt filling the house. Maybe you grabbed drinks, cans of soda or bottles of beer and brought them to the living room. Then came the setup. Your TV sat on its stand or entertainment center. Probably a big CRT television, 19 or 27 or even 32 inches if you'd splurged. Below or beside it sat your VCR, that black rectangular box that had become as essential to home entertainment as the television itself. You took the movie out of its Blockbuster case, revealing the black VHS cassette inside. There was the label with the movie title and the Blockbuster barcode sticker. You opened the VCR's tape door and slid the cassette in, hearing that satisfying mechanical sound as the machine accepted the tape and pulled it in. You pressed the tape door closed with a soft click. The VCR's display showed 12 o'clock blinking, like almost every VCR in America, because nobody ever bothered to set the clock properly. You grabbed the remote control. Maybe it was the TV remote, maybe the VCR remote, maybe the universal remote that controlled both. You pressed the power button on the TV, and after a moment, the screen glowed to life. You switched to the correct input channel, usually channel 3 or 4, the channel that connected to the VCR. A blue screen appeared, or maybe the FBI warning was already displaying. That intimidating message about unauthorized copying and federal prosecution that started every rental tape. You settled onto the couch, arranging the pillows just right, maybe pulling a blanket over your legs. The room was dim, just how you liked it for watching movies, with maybe one lamp on low in the corner. The popcorn was in a bowl on your lap or on the coffee table within easy reach. Your drink was nearby. Everything was perfect. You pressed play. The VCR whirred to life, and the tape began to spin. First came the FBI warning. White text on blue background, stern and official. You'd seen this warning hundreds of times. Then came the previews, the coming soon to video trailers for other movies. These trailers were interesting sometimes, giving you ideas for future rentals. Other times, you fast-forwarded through them, eager to get to the main feature. The fast-forward on VCRS made that distinctive high-pitched whirring sound, the image on screen speeding past in a blur. Sometimes the tracking needed adjustment. The picture might roll or have lines through it, a common VCR issue. You'd press the tracking buttons on the remote, little up and down arrows, adjusting until the picture stabilized and cleared. It was a small technical ritual that everyone who used VCRS knew instinctively. Finally, the movie began. The studio logo appeared, maybe the Paramount Mountain or the Columbia Lady with the torch, or the Warner Brothers shield. The opening credits rolled. The first scene started. You settled deeper into the couch, took a handful of popcorn, and let yourself be absorbed into the story. This was the magic of movie night. For the next 2 hours, you were transported. You weren't in your living room anymore. You were wherever the movie took you. If it was a good movie, and most of the time, you'd chosen well, you were completely absorbed, living in that fictional world, caring about those fictional characters. The VCR tape spun in its machine, magnetic tape passing over red heads, translating encoded signals into moving images and sound on your TV screen. This technology that had seemed so miraculous when it first appeared, that had revolutionized home entertainment, had become so ordinary that you barely thought about it. You just press play and the magic happened. About 45 minutes into the movie, the tape reached the end of side A on some older rentals, and you had to get up to flip it over. Or maybe you didn't. By the late 90s, most movies were recorded on EP mode, fitting the entire film on one side. But earlier in the decade, longer movies sometimes required a flip halfway through. When the movie ended, you watched the credits roll, or maybe you pressed stop before they finished. The VCR clunked to a halt. The blue screen appeared again. You pressed rewind, and the VCR began its work, spooling the tape back to the beginning. This took several minutes, and the VCR made that distinctive rewinding sound, a whirring hum that was part of the soundtrack of 90s home entertainment. "Be kind, please rewind" was Blockbuster's famous slogan, printed on stickers all over the store, on the video cases themselves. Rewinding before you returned the tape was basic courtesy, though not everyone did it. If you rented a tape that hadn't been rewound, you had to wait while your VCR rewound it before you could watch, which was mildly annoying. But your VCR could rewind tapes, so it wasn't a huge deal. While the tape rewound, you cleaned up, taking the popcorn bowl to the kitchen, throwing away napkins, putting away the drinks. You thought about the movie you just watched, whether you'd liked it, whether you'd recommend it to friends. If it had been truly great, you felt that satisfying glow of having spent your time well. If it had been disappointing, well, that was the risk you took. Not every rental was a winner, but the ones that were made the whole system worthwhile. The VCR clicked, signaling that the rewind was complete. You ejected the tape, put it back in its blue Blockbuster case, and set it by the door or in your car, ready to return tomorrow or Sunday or Monday. Movie night was complete. The ritual had been fulfilled, and in a few days, maybe next Friday, you'd do it all again. Part 7. The social fabric of Blockbuster. But Blockbuster was more than just a place to rent movies. It was woven into the social fabric of American life in the 90s and early 2000s. It was where you ran into neighbors and friends, where you had spontaneous conversations, where recommendations were shared and social plans were made. Remember standing in line, recognizing someone from your office or your gym or your church. That moment of, oh hey. The quick conversation about what you were renting, what they'd seen recently that was good. Sometimes these casual encounters turned into longer conversations, even plans. We should get together sometime. Are you doing anything tonight? Want to come over and watch this with us? Blockbuster was a third place, to use sociologist Ray Oldenburg's term. Not home, not work, but a communal space where community happened organically. The store itself facilitated social interaction simply by bringing people together in a shared space with a shared purpose. For teenagers in the 90s, Blockbuster had particular significance. If you were 15 or 16, you probably didn't have many places you could go without adult supervision. The mall, maybe. fast food restaurants, and Blockbuster. You could walk or bike there with friends, spend an hour browsing movies, debating which horror film was the scariest, which comedy was the funniest. You didn't even have to rent anything, though eventually someone would. Just being there was entertainment in itself. For parents, Friday night trips to Blockbuster with kids became part of family routine. Children loved going to Blockbuster, loved the ritual of being allowed to pick a movie, the power of choice, the anticipation of movie night at home. The children's section was designed to appeal to kids, bright and colorful, organized in ways that made sense to young minds. Disney movies had their own special place, prominently displayed, easily found. Parents navigated the eternal negotiation with children about which movies were appropriate, which ones they'd already seen too many times, how many movies they could rent. We're getting 2 movies, one for you kids and one for after you go to bed. The trip to Blockbuster was quality time, even with the debates and negotiations, maybe especially because of them. For couples, browsing Blockbuster together was its own form of intimacy. The conversations about what to watch revealed things, tastes, moods, willingness to compromise, how you made decisions together. Some couples had standing movie dates, Friday or Saturday nights at home with a rented movie, a weekly ritual that structured their time together. For people who lived alone, who worked long hours, or who were new to town, or who were naturally introverted, Blockbuster provided a reason to leave the house, a destination, a brief connection to the wider world. Even if you didn't talk to anyone beyond the checkout clerk, you were around other people, part of something communal, however briefly. The employees became familiar faces. If you went to the same Blockbuster regularly, you got to know the staff, at least to recognize them and exchange greetings. Some employees were genuinely passionate about movies and loved making recommendations. Others were just working a job, but even they became part of your routine, part of your Friday nights. There were the regulars, customers who came in so often that employees knew them by name, knew their tastes, could make informed suggestions. Oh, you like that? Then you'll love this one. These micro-relationships might seem insignificant, but they added up to something larger, a sense of community, of being known, of being part of a place. And the conversations that happened inside Blockbuster were genuine. When someone recommended a movie to you in the store, they weren't being paid to do so, weren't following an algorithm's suggestion. They were sharing something they'd personally enjoyed, human to human, one film lover to another. The recommendations had weight because they came from real experience. This social dimension of Blockbuster would be lost in the streaming era. You can't run into your neighbor on Netflix. You can't have a spontaneous conversation about movies in the virtual space of Amazon Prime. The algorithms make recommendations, but they lack the warmth of human enthusiasm. Something essential was traded for convenience. Part 8. Special Memories and Moments. As you lie here, relaxed and drifting, let your mind wander through your own Blockbuster memories. Maybe you remember specific moments, little snapshots that have stayed with you across the years. Maybe you remember the first time you went to Blockbuster, the overwhelming feeling of seeing so many movies in one place, the sense of infinite possibility, the pride of getting your own membership card, your name printed on it, proof that you belong to this system. Maybe you remember going to Blockbuster during a snowstorm, the parking lot covered in white, your breath fogging in the cold air, but inside it was warm and bright and normal, a refuge from the weather. You rented movies knowing you'd be snowed in for the weekend, stocking up on entertainment like gathering supplies. Maybe you remember going to Blockbuster late at night near closing time, when the store was quiet and nearly empty. The employees were cleaning up, restocking, counting the register. You were one of the last customers, rushing to find something before they closed. The store felt different at that hour, more intimate, like you were seeing it in a private moment. Maybe you remember the excitement of a particular movie becoming available. You'd been waiting for months for it to come out on video, checking every week. Finally, it appeared in the new releases section, and you grabbed it immediately, triumphant. That movie you'd missed in theaters, or that movie you'd loved in theaters and wanted to see again. It was finally yours for the night. Maybe you remember midnight releases for huge movies. In the early 2000s, Blockbuster started doing midnight release events for major titles, staying open late, so people could rent them the moment they became available. These events had a festive atmosphere. People lined up in anticipation, employees handing out promotional materials, everyone excited to be part of something special. Maybe you remember renting movies for special occasions. New Year's Eve, staying home instead of going out, renting 3 or 4 movies for a marathon, Thanksgiving break from school, loading up on rentals for the long weekend, sick days, when you were home from work with a cold, and renting a few comfort movies made being sick more bearable. Maybe you remember discovering a movie at Blockbuster that became one of your all-time favorites. Something you'd never heard of, that you rented on a whim based on the cover art or the description, and it turned out to be amazing. That special thrill of discovery, of finding treasure in the stacks. Maybe you remember the bittersweet feeling of renting a movie you'd watched as a child, introducing it to your own children years later. The nostalgia of seeing those familiar opening credits, the joy of sharing something you loved, the strange sensation of time folding in on itself. Maybe you remember trying to find obscure movies, asking employees if they could track down a particular title, special ordering something that wasn't in stock. The effort required made finally watching the movie more rewarding. Maybe you remember the decorations at Blockbuster during holidays, the Halloween displays with spooky decorations and horror movie promotions, the Christmas season with holiday films featured prominently, everything from It's a Wonderful Life to Home Alone. The store acknowledged the rhythms of the year, changed with the seasons. Maybe you remember the evolution of the technology, the transition from VHS to DVD in the late 90s and early 2000s. DVD seemed miraculous at first. No rewinding, better picture quality, no tracking issues, special features, and director's commentaries and deleted scenes. Blockbuster adapted, creating separate DVD sections, eventually phasing out VHS entirely. For a while, both formats coexisted, and you could rent the same movie on either VHS or DVD, depending on what equipment you had at home. Maybe you remember the awkwardness of renting certain movies. If you rented something romantic or sexy, you might feel slightly self-conscious at checkout, though the employees never judged. They'd seen everything. If you rented something particularly violent or disturbing, you might wonder what the clerk thought of your choice. These small moments of vulnerability, being seen in your entertainment choices. Maybe you remember going to Blockbuster in different cities when you traveled, finding a Blockbuster in an unfamiliar place, in a city you were visiting for work or vacation, and feeling that sense of recognition and comfort. The store looked the same, felt the same, even though you were far from home. Maybe you remember the disappointment of finding empty shelves where a popular movie should have been. The Friday night scramble when everyone wanted the same new release and you arrived too late. Having to choose a backup option, your second or third choice. It was frustrating in the moment, but it also added stakes to the process, made success more satisfying. Maybe you remember working at Blockbuster yourself. If you were one of the thousands of employees over the years, you have your own set of memories. The blue polo shirt or t-shirt uniform, learning the computer system, memorizing where different movies were shelved, dealing with late fees and customer complaints, making recommendations and feeling pleased when someone came back to tell you they'd loved your suggestion. The camaraderie with fellow employees, the in-jokes, the slow weekday shifts versus the controlled chaos of Friday and Saturday nights, the employee perks, being able to rent movies for free, seeing new releases before most people. These memories are personal and specific to you, but they're also shared by millions. Everyone who spent time in Blockbuster has their own version of these memories, their own stories. That's part of what made Blockbuster significant. It wasn't just a business, it was a shared experience, a common reference point, part of the cultural landscape of an entire generation. Let yourself rest deeper now, your breathing slow and even, as we move toward the end of our story. Part 9. The beginning of the end. The peak was 2004. 9,000 stores worldwide, 84,000 employees, $6 billion in revenue. Blockbuster seemed invincible, a permanent fixture of American life. How could it ever go away? But even at the peak, the seeds of decline had been planted. In 1997, a small startup called Netflix was founded by Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph. The story, possibly apocryphal but widely told, is that Hastings came up with the idea after being charged a $40 late fee by Blockbuster for a rental of Apollo 13. Whether true or not, Netflix positioned itself as the anti-Blockbuster. No late fees, no trips to the store, no limited selection. Netflix started with DVD by mail service. You selected movies on their website. They mailed them to you in distinctive red envelopes. You watched them and mailed them back. No due dates as long as you kept your subscription active. It seemed like a niche service at first, something for early adopters and film enthusiasts, not a threat to Blockbuster's dominance. In 2000, Netflix approached Blockbuster with a proposal. Netflix would handle Blockbuster's online rental service, and Blockbuster would promote Netflix in stores. The asking price for the partnership was $50 million. Blockbuster's leadership, headed by CEO John Antioco, declined. From their perspective, Netflix was too small to worry about, and Blockbuster's core business, physical retail stores, remained incredibly profitable. Why pay millions for an unproven online service? This decision would later be called one of the biggest business blunders in history, but at the time, it didn't seem unreasonable. In 2000, Netflix had just 300,000 subscribers. Blockbuster had millions of customers walking through their doors every week. The internet was still relatively new, broadband penetration was low, and the idea of streaming video seemed like science fiction. But technology moved faster than Blockbuster anticipated. Broadband internet became more common throughout the early 2000s. DVDs replaced VHS tapes, and their smaller size made them perfect for mail delivery. Netflix grew steadily, reaching 1 million subscribers by 2003, 2 million by 2004. Their model had real advantages: convenience, no late fees, a vastly larger selection than any physical store could offer. Blockbuster did eventually respond. In 2004, they launched Blockbuster Online, their own DVD by mail service, directly competing with Netflix. They even had an advantage. Subscribers could return their online rentals to physical stores and immediately get another movie, combining online convenience with retail immediacy. It was a clever hybrid approach. But it was too late, and the execution was flawed. Blockbuster's leadership was divided about whether to prioritize the online service or protect the profitable physical stores. The company was also burdened by massive debt from its aggressive expansion years. In 2005, activist investor Carl Icahn took a large stake in Blockbuster and pushed out CEO John Antioco, who had been driving the online transition. The new leadership, under CEO Jim Keyes, was skeptical of online services and refocused on retail stores, calling them the foundation of our business. This was 2007, the same year Netflix launched its streaming service. The future had arrived, and Blockbuster was looking backward. Throughout 2008 and 2009, Blockbuster stores began closing, first dozens, then hundreds. The closings accelerated as the Great Recession hit and consumer spending contracted. Each closing was a small tragedy for the community it served, an institution vanishing, a familiar place going away. On September 23, 2010, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, carrying about $900 million in debt. The company tried to reorganize, tried to compete, tried various strategies to survive, but the momentum had shifted irreversibly. In 2013, Dish Network, which had purchased Blockbuster's assets during bankruptcy, announced it would close the remaining 300 company-owned stores. Franchises could stay open if they chose, but corporate support was ending. By 2014, only a handful of Blockbuster stores remained, a few franchise locations holding on through local loyalty and nostalgia. The blue and yellow signs came down from strip malls across America, leaving empty retail spaces where there had once been Friday night destinations. Today, in 2025, only one Blockbuster store remains open, a franchise location in Bend, Oregon. It has become a tourist attraction, a nostalgia destination, the last physical remnant of what was once a cultural institution. People visit it the way they might visit a museum, to see something that no longer exists anywhere else, to remember. Part 10. What was lost and what remains. The convenience of streaming is undeniable. With a few clicks, you can access thousands of movies and TV shows instantly. No driving to a store, no late fees, no worrying about whether your desired title is in stock. You can watch what you want, when you want, pausing and resuming at will across multiple devices. The algorithms learn your preferences and suggest new content. It's easier in every measurable way. But something was lost in that transition, something harder to quantify. The ritual was lost. The journey was lost. The serendipity of browsing physical shelves was lost. The social dimension, those casual conversations with fellow customers and knowledgeable staff, was lost. The commitment, having to actually choose a movie, take it home, watch it, was lost. In the streaming era, choice is abundant, but commitment is scarce. You might spend 30 minutes scrolling through Netflix trying to decide what to watch, a phenomenon people jokingly call Netflix paralysis. With so many options always available, nothing feels special. You might start a movie and bail out after 20 minutes if it doesn't immediately grab you. There's no investment in the decision, no skin in the game. At Blockbuster, you made a choice. You committed to it by driving to the store, by browsing, by renting that specific movie, by taking it home. That commitment made you more likely to engage fully, to give the movie a fair chance, to see it through, even if it started slowly. The friction in the process, which seemed like a drawback at the time, actually served a purpose. The physical media had weight, literally and figuratively. The VHS tape in your hands was a tangible thing, an object that represented the movie it contained. Later, DVDs had their own physical presence, cases you could arrange on a shelf, cover art you could admire. Digital files have no weight, no presence. They exist somewhere in the cloud, streaming to your device, but never truly in your possession. The curation was different too. Blockbuster's selection was finite, limited by physical space. This seemed like a constraint, but it was also a form of curation. Someone decided what movies to stock, which titles to order multiple copies of, what to feature in prominent displays. Netflix's algorithm-driven recommendations are personalized but impersonal. Blockbuster's staff recommendations were limited but human. The community aspect is perhaps what's missed most. Streaming is a solitary activity, you and your screen. Blockbuster was inherently social, a shared space where you encountered other people, where you existed in community, however briefly. In an era where community spaces are increasingly scarce, where people increasingly stay home and interact digitally, the loss of third places like Blockbuster matters more than we might have realized at the time. The Friday night movie run was a ritual that structured time, that marked the transition from work week to weekend. It got you off the couch, out of the house, moving through the world. The small journey to Blockbuster and back became part of the pleasure, part of the experience. With streaming, there's no journey at all. Every night can be movie night, which paradoxically makes no night special. There's also the way Blockbuster served as cultural common ground. In the 90s and early 2000s, many people were watching the same relatively limited set of movies. You could reference a popular rental in conversation and expect most people to have seen it or know about it. Culture was more shared, less fragmented. Streaming's infinite selection means we all watch different things now, our cultural experiences increasingly siloed and personalized. None of this is to say that Blockbuster's business model should have survived or could have survived. The march of technology and changing consumer preferences makes such transitions inevitable. The convenience of streaming is real and valuable. Most people, given the choice, prefer the ease of digital access to the friction of physical rental. But it's worth acknowledging what was lost, worth remembering what it was like, worth recognizing that efficiency and convenience aren't the only values that matter. Sometimes the journey matters as much as the destination. Sometimes friction serves a purpose. Sometimes the old way, however obsolete, had qualities worth preserving, at least in memory. Part 11. The Last Visit. Many people who lived through the Blockbuster era remember their last visit, even if they didn't know at the time that it would be their last. Maybe it was 2010 or 2011, and you'd been going less frequently because Netflix was so convenient. But you still made the occasional trip to Blockbuster, out of habit or nostalgia, or for new releases that weren't yet available streaming. You drove to your usual location, and something felt different. The parking lot was emptier than usual, even for a Friday evening. Some of the lights in the Blockbuster sign weren't working, letters dark against the evening sky. When you walked in, you noticed the store looked picked over. Sections with fewer movies than before. Empty spaces on shelves that would have been full in earlier years. The new releases section was smaller, fewer copies of each title. The staff seemed reduced, maybe one person at the checkout instead of 2 or 3. There were signs advertising sales, discounts on previously viewed movies that Blockbuster was selling off. You browsed the aisles, and there was a melancholy to it, a sense of something ending. Maybe you didn't articulate it consciously, but you felt it. This place that had been such a constant in your life, that had seemed permanent, was fading. You found a movie and rented it, exchanging pleasantries with the employee at checkout. Maybe they mentioned that the store might be closing soon, that corporate was shutting down locations, that they'd be out of a job. Maybe they didn't say anything, but you both knew. You took your movie home, watched it, returned it a few days later. Maybe you thought about going back the next week, but you decided to just watch something on Netflix instead. Easier, more convenient. And then weeks passed, then months, and you never went back to Blockbuster. At some point, you drove by and saw the signs were gone, the windows papered over, a for lease sign in the window. The place that had been there, always there, was simply gone. An empty retail space, soon to be filled by something else, or to remain empty. A gap in the strip mall where there had once been a destination. Maybe you felt a pang of loss. Maybe you felt nostalgic for Friday nights of years past. Maybe you just noted it and moved on. Such is life. Things change. Nothing lasts forever. But the memories remain. Even now, years later, you can close your eyes and see those blue and yellow aisles, can remember the feeling of browsing on a Friday night, can recall specific movies you rented and evenings you spent watching them. These memories are part of your history, part of your personal story. Blockbuster is gone, but it existed. It was real. It mattered. For a couple of decades, it was woven into the fabric of millions of lives, part of the routine and rhythm of ordinary existence. And because it mattered then, because those experiences were real and meaningful, they continue to exist in memory, bright and clear, accessible whenever you want to revisit them. Like right now, as you lie here in comfort and safety, relaxed and drifting towards sleep. You can remember it all, the blue and yellow sign glowing against the evening sky, the distinctive smell when you walked in, the weight of the VHS case in your hands, the pleasure of browsing, the satisfaction of finding the perfect movie, the anticipation on the drive home, settling onto the couch with popcorn, pressing play. These memories are yours to keep, a part of your history that can never be taken away. And as you drift deeper now, deeper into relaxation and rest, you can hold these memories gently, appreciating them for what they were. Moments of simple pleasure, ordinary evenings that in retrospect seem almost magical, fragments of a time that's gone, but not forgotten. Part 12. Drifting into sleep. Let your breathing become even slower now, even more relaxed. Your body is completely at rest, sinking into your bed, heavy and comfortable. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. You're here, in this moment, comfortable and safe and drifting. The story is coming to an end, but the memories remain, warm and accessible. Blockbuster nights, Friday evenings, the ritual of renting movies. These experiences are part of you, part of your story, treasures stored in memory that you can revisit whenever you choose. As you drift now, drifting deeper towards sleep, you might find yourself remembering other details. The texture of the blue Blockbuster case in your hands, the sound of the scanner beeping at checkout, the way the store looked lit up against the dark sky on winter evenings, the excitement of seeing a movie you'd been waiting for finally appear in the new releases section. The comfort of routine, of knowing what Friday nights would bring. These memories are pleasant and soothing, requiring nothing from you, simply there to appreciate. And as you appreciate them, as you hold them gently in your mind, you feel yourself relaxing even more, drifting even deeper. Your breathing is so slow now, so calm, in and out, natural and easy. Your body is completely relaxed, every muscle loose and comfortable. Your mind is quiet, thoughts drifting lazily like clouds across a summer sky. The blue and yellow of the Blockbuster logo glows softly in your memory, not jarring or bright, just gently present. You can imagine yourself standing in those familiar aisles one more time, browsing peacefully, taking your time, no rush, no pressure, just the pleasant ritual of choosing a movie for a quiet evening at home. You select something good, something you know you'll enjoy. You take it to the counter, exchange friendly words with the employee, complete the transaction. You walk out into a peaceful evening, the weekend stretching ahead, full of rest and ease. You drive home through quiet streets, the movie on the seat beside you. You arrive home, settle in, prepare for a cozy evening. You press play, and the movie begins, drawing you into its story. But as you watch, the story and the memory and the present moment all blur together, boundaries dissolving, everything soft and dreamlike. And you realize you're not just remembering anymore, you're dreaming. You've crossed that threshold from waking to sleeping so gently that you barely notice the transition. The memories have carried you into sleep, like a boat drifting downstream, pulled by a gentle current toward rest. The Blockbuster aisles in your mind are peaceful now, empty and quiet, just for you. You walk through them in your dream, feeling content and safe. The movies on the shelves contain infinite stories, infinite possibilities, but you don't need to choose. You're just here, just present, just drifting. The blue and yellow fade to softer colors, to gentle darkness, to the deep rest of true sleep. Your breathing continues, slow and steady, your body completely at rest. The memories have done their work, carrying you from waking to sleeping, from story to dream, from remembering to pure rest. And now you sleep, deeply and peacefully. While somewhere in your dreams, the Blockbuster sign still glows, marking a place that exists now only in memory and dream. A place you can always return to when you need comfort, when you want to remember simpler times, when you want to feel that particular Friday evening anticipation of movie night ahead. Sleep now, rest deeply. The story is complete, the memories are safe, and you are drifting in the most peaceful, restorative sleep, where all is well, all is calm, and all is exactly as it should be. Good night, sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the simple pleasures of Blockbuster nights and movie memories, warm and cozy, and forever yours.